Welcome to another weekly update. I hope you're doing well. I hope you had a good week. I hope you had a good weekend. Hope you're ready for a new week. A couple of things to talk through this week. I don't think it's going to be a really long one this week. There was quite a lot of news last week, and so maybe kind of the ebb and flow of the news cycle just means that it just doesn't seem to be quite as much this week, but that's okay. So let's get into it. First thing I want to cover is a blog post about Microsoft Graph connectors. Now, I've talked about Microsoft Graph connectors before as suddenly, something that they've been around for a while, but they've kind of catapulted into prominence recently because they are one of the ways in which you can extend Microsoft Copilot, and how you can take your data and make it available in Microsoft Copilot is with Microsoft Graph connectors. And so I've been talking about connectors for the past couple of months as a way of helping prepare your development side of things, your development organization, your development team, your product, your service, getting it ready for Copilot, making it accessible for Copilot. And now there's a blog post from the Microsoft 365 dev blogs team talking about exactly that same thing. So if you don't believe me, you can believe them. So let's look at the blog post. The title is Find What You Need with Microsoft Graph Connectors. And yeah, what it's saying is, it introduces the idea of connectors and what they do. But the kind of interesting thing here, adding connectors, making your data available via Microsoft Graph connectors is not just a Copilot thing. It'll make all of search in Microsoft 365 better. You're providing more content and information to Microsoft 365. So all of 365 services that rely on content are going to improve. Copilot is the most visible of that right now. And you can see it's called out right here, Copilot. So a little bit about what they are and how they show up and how you can get started as a developer, what APIs are available, what SDKs are available. A little bit on security, and then some next steps. So it's a nicely put together blog post to give you everything you need. It's got the detail in it. So if you're a developer, go check that out. This is going to be good for organizations or teams or products or whatever it is that sit on a lot of valuable data that isn't already in Microsoft 365. So whatever your product or services is, if you're generating data, if you have unique data and it makes sense for users to be able to access that in the context of Microsoft 365, which might be Copilot, but it might be other things as well, then go have a look at these graph connectors. This is one way of getting data into Copilot. The other way of not necessarily getting data into Copilot, but integrating with Copilot, by the way, is messaging extensions, which we've talked about quite a lot in previous weeks as well. So I think connectors and extensions are the two big ways you're going to interact with Copilot as a developer. All right, let's talk about something else. Microsoft Graph CLI. This I didn't even realize was being built, and I'm quite excited about it. So you've got things like CLI, command line interface. You've got the Azure CLI. You've got kind of Cloud Shell. You've got command prompt, PowerShell. These are CLIs, and we all know what they are. Imagine a CLI for working with Microsoft Graph. Quite a cool idea, right? Isn't it? Like, as a developer, I can kind of see, okay, if I quickly need to just set up some data, access something, try something out, or like just access some data in Graph and see what it is. Maybe as part of a script, maybe as part of a script, or something else, or just trying something out, or just quickly accessing something or setting some value. Having access to a CLI would be really cool. And there's now a CLI. There's a release candidate of v1.0 of the Microsoft Graph CLI, and it supports the beta endpoints as well. Really interesting. So here's the blog post for this, and it's been going for a little while. They've been some pre-release versions, so they've already got like a what's new story. They're already adding things to what was there before. But you can now get it on NuGet, which is cool, which means that you can install it super easily with one line. I love this. Right out of the box, it works with Windows Terminal, it works with Mac OS, and it works with PowerShell. It's got lots of different options for authentication. I think down here there's some examples of using it. You can kind of output in different formats. Like as a nice table or just a JSON. This is going to be super useful. This is going to, I think, be So quite often in Graph, I just want to either see how the format of data looks, or I want to see what data comes back when I make this call. And for me right now, that involves going to Postman, usually hoping that they support application permissions. And then I've just got like an application preset up in Postman I use to go and generate a token and take that token and take it into my new call if I'm just kind of messing around and trying stuff out. I feel like the CLI is going to be a quicker route for me to do that, because I can presumably quickly auth with my user auth, and that way I'll be able to use all the endpoints that are user permission scope, not just app permission scope. But it'll also be a kind of quicker way, I think, of me just having a look at that data. I think this is really cool. I'm going to go back to the blog post for a minute because they've got even more examples to go through. You can get the logged in users details with I like their format of, you can kind of see, right? You got the MGC, then me, get. You can see how it maps to the kind of structure of what you need to do. There is going to be a little bit of learning, I think, in terms of us figuring out how to just figuring out the commands and syntax, but it's all documented. And looking at it, it feels like it follows a good syntax where the final verb is kind of roughly maps to the API verb, of the REST API. And then the bit in the middle is probably if you took away the slashes and reversed the order, I think, or maybe not even reverse the order. I don't know. It feels like you could figure a lot of stuff out quite easily, but it looks like there's good documentation. And my guess is going to be that the documentation and this is going to stay relatively up to date, because I think this is just one more output from that Kyoto stuff they talked about a while back, that I have talked about previously, where they have got this way of generating SDKs from Graph. They've figured out the layout and the structure of what Graph is, and therefore they can kind of spit out these APIs and SDKs in lots of different languages and keep them all up to date. It feels like this is just another output from that, which is really cool. I think it's nice. It's exciting. So yeah, I'm keen to try that, and go check that out as well if you want a CLI for Microsoft Graph. It's a cool idea. All right. Stepping completely sideways for a minute to a completely different blog post, because today is National Disabled Employee Awareness Month, at least in the US. And Microsoft have a blog post about how they have specific features for developers in Visual Studio and Visual Studio Code to help accessibility features, really. But I want to kind of this alongside something I heard from Al Erdley at South Coast, not South Coast, we're going to talk about South Coast in a minute, at Collab Days Bletchley a couple of weeks ago, where he really reframed how I think about accessibility features. And he said that not to think about them specifically as a set of tools for a particular group of people, but actually what he's found, and actually what resonated with me as well, is that when you understand what these tools do, you come away thinking, well, actually, that's just useful. That's useful to me. There's parts that I could take in my job. So I think they're just useful tools. They're not necessarily for a set of people and therefore not for another set of people. They're just useful tools, and you can use as much or as little of them as you want. And so I think it's useful to look through these tools, because actually there's things in here that I will find really useful as well. So accessibility features, you've got things like screen reader support, zoom and magnification. Now, I know it's not the intended use case. I find this really useful. The ability to zoom in and out. I give talks. I show code on screen to people who aren't used to seeing code. Yeah, so I need to take small bits of code, zoom it right up, and step through it line by line, section by section. So actually, for me, having really good zoom and magnification support in Visual Studio and code is really useful. But that's not why Microsoft did it, but this is what I mean by these accessibility features, right? They actually have use for everybody in different places and in different ways. Same with high contrast themes. Keyboard shortcuts, 100%. You could be a more productive developer if you got your head round all of the keyboard shortcuts. That's not an accessibility feature. That is a productivity feature. IntelliSense and code completion. Yeah, absolutely. It reduces typing, reduces memorizing syntax, but also it helps you be more productive. And then accessibility testing and validation. I think this is going to get more and more useful. There's some stuff coming down the line that I don't know very much about, but I'm hoping to find out next week, more on that in a minute, around European acts that will enforce and mandate greater accessibility rules. So I'm kind of interested to see that. And there's a whole section here on Copilot, GitHub Copilot, and how it can help people. Yep, it's a great help. I use it every time I code. It's become a very useful part of my kind of coding toolbox. I should probably do a blog post actually about how I use it and how I don't use it, which is, I think, would be interesting, because I kind of got thoughts, but they're not fully formed at the moment. And there's a bunch of sort of testimonials, if you like, sort of user stories, which you might find interesting as well. So I thought it was an interesting blog post. I think it's worth a read. Yeah, so if you get 5 minutes today and you want something to read with your cup of coffee or tea or whatever it is you drink, this is a good one. So try this. All right, I said I wasn't going to go long, and what are we doing? We're at 10 minutes. Okay, let's talk South Coast Summit. So that's the next thing that's coming up for me. It's coming up this weekend. It's this Friday and Saturday. That's the 13th and 14th of October. It's at Farnborough International Exhibition and Conference Centre in the UK. It's free to attend on the Saturday. There are workshops on the Friday. If you haven't yet booked a workshop for the Friday, you might be all right, but I would really go and sort it today. If you haven't booked tickets for the Saturday, they're free to book. And again, I don't know if there's any left. I would be super quick if I were you, and get that sorted. But this is a big Microsoft conference. I think in the UK I think last year was the largest community conference that was just focused on Microsoft products and services. And so this year, maybe it's even bigger, I don't know. But it's in 4 and a bit days time, and I'm going to be there. I'm going to hopefully meet a ton of you lot, and that would be great. There's some really interesting sessions I can't wait to get to. I've been doing some videos on LinkedIn about the sessions and how to choose good sessions, but also how to get there, because it's a new venue this year from last year. So even if you went last year, everything has changed. It's at a new venue. So I've got some videos out on LinkedIn that you can go and watch if that sounds interesting. If you are attending, there's 2 videos you might want to watch there. The first is all about the new venue and how to get there, and the second one is just kind of about the sessions and how I choose sessions for various conferences and South Coast. I go kind of through my example for South Coast Summit of how I've chosen sessions. I think that's everything that's happening this week. I'm sure there's something else I've forgotten, but we'll talk about it next week if there is. Whatever it is you're doing this week, I hope you have a great one, and I will speak to you again next time.